This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. I'm Josh Wertheim, president of Wertheim Global Solutions, and today I am joined by Brent Reed, who is my manager of development and support. We're going to provide you with this webinar on our Guardian product for eDOCS today. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll be doing another presentation for our content server clients, because Guardian works both with eDOCS and OpenText Content Server. And the title of this presentation is Enhanced Protection from Bad Actors for OpenText eDOCS and Content Server. Most organizations do a pretty good job of protecting themselves from people who try to get in from the outside. You probably have lots of products in your network environment that monitor for people who try to get in and hack into your systems. What a lot of folks don't have is protection from people inside your organization who may be trying to get in and do damage for a variety of different reasons, which we'll go through today. So with that in mind, these are the kind of questions that we find our customers and prospects asking themselves. Have you ever had an end user steal information out of your enterprise content management repository? Are you concerned that somebody may be trying to get in the future and take information out of your system? Are you concerned that people in your organization may be susceptible to phishing attacks, where somebody might be trying to get the credentials of that user and then using those credentials connect into your system, acting like that perfectly innocent end user and then taking information out of the system that way? Do you have a way of identifying when somebody is trying to take information out of your system, or when somebody has been phished and that phisher has been downloading or taking documents out of your system? And obviously, the most important part of it is, do you have a way to stop them while they are taking information out of your system? And then just a final kind of wrap-up question: what would happen to you in your business if some confidential information was stolen and then leaked or used against you or perhaps one of your clients? So this is kind of a semi-facetious slide, but what can you do to protect yourself? Well, one way is to make sure you hire great, honest people who never would steal anything from you ever, and you're 100% convinced and assured that nobody's going to take information out of your system. Or you could hire a bunch of people to watch over your users 24/7, including the middle of the night and on weekends, to make sure that those users aren't trying to take information out, or that they haven't been phished and then their credentials stolen and then the phisher takes the information. Or you could implement a solution such as Guardian that watches over your documents, makes sure that users aren't doing things that you would be concerned about, lets you know when it looks like they are doing something they shouldn't be doing, and then optionally allows you to disable their account, even if it's the middle of the night, until you review what they've been doing and take the appropriate action if they are indeed trying to take information out of your system. So what does Guardian do? We call it activity monitoring on steroids. First of all, it identifies and reports on suspicious or criminal activity while it's happening. So I always use the example of Edward Snowden. He's sitting in Hawaii, it's 2 o'clock in the morning in Hawaii, or it's 2 o'clock, I should say, in Washington, D.C., when his boss or supervisors in the NSA are sound asleep, and he's happily and merrily downloading documents out of the NSA system. This is a person who had the rights to do that. It's not something that security could have prevented, like an eDOCS security system, because this person had rights to download anything he wanted in their system. So we can identify and report on that kind of behavior while it's happening. So you don't have to wait until your documents are long gone. Or in the example of Edward Snowden, he's taken all his documents, he's headed to Hong Kong, he's now talking to a reporter from The Guardian. And I don't even think that the NSA even knew he had taken the documents until they showed up in the article in the Guardian newspaper. It allows you to monitor individual activities, or as I will explain later, groups of activities. It can monitor individual users if you want to set up what we call rules to monitor a specific user if you have concerns that user is doing something he shouldn't be. It can monitor a group of users, or it can monitor all users in a library. Or it will allow you to monitor a specific disparate list of users. Again, I'll explain that in a little while. The nice thing about Guardian is that if it finds that a user has exceeded a threshold, it can automatically disable the user. So again, referring back to the Edward Snowden example, it's 2 o'clock in the morning when the boss is asleep. He's downloading documents. With a system like Guardian in place, perhaps the boss would have gotten a email or an SMS text message saying Edward Snowden's doing something he shouldn't be doing. But if the boss is asleep and doesn't see that, you could set up a separate threshold that says, well, if he exceeds the threshold by a certain percentage above that which caused the first notification to go out, at this point, disable the user so they can't continue to download documents to their heart's content. Guardian allows you to set up what are called exceptions. Exceptions would be, for instance, if a user normally only downloads a few documents a day, but all of a sudden they're going to be doing e-discovery, which might result in them downloading thousands of documents. If you know this is the case, you can set up an exception, and that way when the user is doing the work that he or she needs to be doing, Guardian will ignore the excess amount of activity for the period that the exception is set up for. So Guardian works with eDOCS 16, and for those of you who may be using or considering content server, it's also 16, version 16.2 that we support. By the way, the e-discovery part is scheduled for Q2 2021. Okay, so this is an example of a rule creation screen. So it's pretty simple, and Brent will demonstrate how this works when he gets to the demonstration part. But basically, you set up a rule, you set up the details of the rule, what type of rule it is, what kind of thresholds you want to set up, and how often do you want to monitor for a user to be doing that kind of activity to exceed the threshold before it kicks off either a notification or a disable. So for instance, you can set up a rule that says, I want to make sure that this person isn't doing more than 10 downloads in a day. Or you could say, I don't want this person to be able to do more than 10 downloads in an hour. So you can be very granular when you set up these rules, as Brent will explain when we get to that part. But it's a pretty simple process to set up rules, manage rules, and otherwise handle the day-to-day chores of Guardian. So this further describes what the rule setup looks like. In this screen, we have a rule set up based upon looks, prints, and percentages above normal activities. All right, a couple of quick use cases. For those of you who are in a law firm, the typical use is you think that a person is thinking of leaving the firm and is planning on taking his or her documents with them. Well, you can set up Guardian to watch that particular person and monitor for activities such as downloads or exports, emails, checkout, etc. And when the user's activity exceeds the threshold you set up, notify the partner. And if it continues to exceed at a higher threshold, disable the user's account. So even if they think they're being smart and downloading stuff at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, Guardian is still watching over them and can prevent them from taking more than you would allow them to take otherwise. Now, with the next release, which is the one I was talking about before, which is scheduled for the second quarter of 2021, let's say you have an attorney in trust and estates, another one in litigation, and another one in banking. And they're thinking of leaving and taking their documents with them. But as far as eDOCS is concerned, these are three disparate people who have no connection to themselves, to each other, I should say, within the framework of how your eDOCS system works. They just want to leave and they want to start a new firm with three different practice areas in this case. Well, what you can do with the next release is you can set up user groups outside of what eDOCS has, where you can say, well, I know this fellow in banking, this fellow in trust and estates, et cetera, they are colluding to leave the firm and take their documents. So you can set up these user group lists, and then Guardian will monitor all three of, in this case, of their activities and handle thresholds for the combined work of the three of them. Someone in human resources doesn't get a promotion, decides to hurt the company before quitting. This is pretty common sometimes. The guy or girl doesn't like their raise, they're thinking of leaving, and they're going to sabotage the business before they go. Well, Guardian can be set up to monitor the people in HR with a higher degree of scrutiny, maybe lower thresholds, because normally they shouldn't be downloading anything, so, or exporting anything. They should maybe check out a few things now and then, but for the most part, they should be not taking stuff out of the eDOCS repository. So you can have HR rules that are higher amounts or lower amounts of thresholds. So the notification and disabling would kick in at an earlier time than it would for the rest of the people in the organization. And the last one I'm going to actually explain is when somebody is phished, as I talked about before, and it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday when the hacker connects in and starts downloading stuff. Well, because Guardian watches over your system 24/7, and if an attack occurs in the middle of the night, when people are not available to receive the notifications, Guardian can be set up to disable the user. Because typically when somebody's credentials are phished, their use, if it's a normal user, maybe downloading or exporting a couple of documents a week, and all of a sudden Guardian recognizes that the person is downloading or trying to download 2,000 documents, that would be set up an alarm, and which Guardian can then handle according to how you set up your rules. I wanted to go through this slide, which for eDOCS would be the difference between Guardian and OpenText eDOCS Defense. These are some of the differences between what we have and what OpenText provides with Defense. You can do thresholds one of two ways today, and we're going to go into a third way, which will be coming in the third quarter next year as well. So you can set up a threshold where it says if a person exports 10 documents in an hour, notify their boss. That's called thresholds by count. But we also have the ability to do thresholds by predictive analysis. This would be where Guardian is set to say, well, if a person's normal activity is an average of 10 exports a day, if they exceed that by 50% at any given time, notify their partner. And if they exceed by 100%, all of a sudden they're doubling what they're doing, then notify and disable their account, because we need to check and find out why this person is doing all of a sudden so many more exports than they normally do. You can notify or disable at any level of threshold, and we have unlimited number of thresholds, which means you can set up a threshold with predictive analysis that says notify at 10%, notify at 20%, notify at 50%, and then eventually disable at 150% if you choose to. You can have unlimited activities per rule as well, which means that you can have one rule that monitors for export, email, download, checkout, and Guardian will then, watch over each of those four individually. So if any of the four items exceeds a threshold, that will trigger the notification and or disabling. We have our own dedicated management console, which I think you saw in the slide, and we're going to show you a little bit more of it in the demo, as opposed to having to use Management Studio, which is very cumbersome and not much fun to use, in my opinion. We're going to allow you to have those exceptions. I mentioned that's in the second quarter of next year. The activity group aggregation would be where I mentioned unlimited activities per rule. So you would be able to have a rule that monitors checkouts, emails, and exports. Well, that rule says if any of those three hit a threshold, do the activity, the notification or disabling. But with activity group aggregation, you can have a rule that says if the aggregate of those three things exceed the threshold. So if a user does 50 exports, 50 emails, and 50 checkouts, that would be if any of those three combined hit the 150 mark. I'm oversimplifying the explanation, but that's how it works. And user group aggregation, as I mentioned before, is when you can have multiple people that may not otherwise be related to each other in the system, but you can have Guardian monitor for their activity as a whole. Now, the last, which we're throwing in the third quarter, is machine learning. Let me give you an example of what machine learning could do. So with predictive analysis, if you say I want to monitor for an excess of 50% above normal activity in a day, then if in any 24-hour rolling period, if the person exceeds their normal activity by that amount, the notification or the disabling could occur. However, with machine learning, what machine learning can do is it can say, well, during normal business hours, they're downloading 10 documents in a day, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, they wouldn't be necessarily doing that. So if I all of a sudden find them downloading 50 documents at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night, machine learning would say, well, this is not normal. So maybe this should kick off a notification that's different than the notification or lack thereof if they were to do the same thing in the middle of the business day. So that's an oversimplified example of how machine learning can help you further granularize the amount of scrutiny that you put on the users if you choose to. Okay, at this point, we're going to flip over to Brent. So just give me one quick second here, and I will transfer the. There we go.
All right, thank you, Josh. Appreciate the presentation and the introduction. What I'm going to show in the demo are two different screens. And the first screen down here on the lower side, I'm going to be the bad actor. Maybe I'm somebody who fished some credentials, and now I'm going to get into the repository and see what kind of documents I can find. Or maybe I'm that disgruntled employee that just wants to cause some damage, or the attorney that wants to get some good documents out of the system so he can start his own company. And in the second window, I'm going to play the good actor. I'm the Guardian eDOCS administrator. So in our scenario, let's say I've fished somebody's credentials and I don't really know what's in the repository. So I start looking and I say, okay, well, there's an accountant's report. There's, wow, okay. Let me try a sample download. I'm just going to grab a few documents here and let's check those out and see if this is going to work for me. Okay, check out all these documents. Okay, I'm looking. Okay, here's the folder I put them on my computer. Let's check out. Okay, yeah, they all downloaded. Okay, I might have some good stuff here. So as he goes on about his duty, the administrator is over here, and I just heard my phone buzz a second ago, so I go over and check my email, and I've just received a new notification. Says the administrator. Of course, I open it up and I say, okay, my Guardian rule has exceeded an established threshold. So I have a user that has checked out a bunch of documents, and I see the types of documents that they downloaded and whose they were and so on. And at this point, I'm not really too concerned. It's like, okay, there's somebody who's downloaded some documents, but I'm not going to worry a whole lot because I know Guardian's in there and there are other thresholds, waiting to let me know if the person continues. So in the meantime, my bad actor, my alter ego over here, hasn't seen anything happen. He's downloaded his documents and okay, well, that first one worked. Let me go ahead and see what else I can find. Okay, a blackmail list. Okay, we've got alcoholic employees. Okay, that could be some fun reading. And some documentation and Panama Papers. What's that about? Oh, password list. Okay, that's a good document. Let's see. Download. Okay. Well, I don't want to do too much at one time. Oh, Swiss bank account numbers, Social Security. Oh, this is too good. So I'm going to go ahead and let's check out a bunch more documents here. I'm sure y'all using eDOCS are familiar with these screens. So now the bad actor, again, successful. He goes in, checks and sees all the documents. Oh yeah, everything came down okay. I've got everything I need. Okay, this is going to be good. Meanwhile, we come up here and the administrator has gotten his next notification and he opens that up and he finds that the rule has been exceeded his limit and the user has now been disabled. And we see who the user is, so we know who we're talking about. Well, we see he's the author of his own documents, which that's sort of odd. So I'm not gonna unlock his account right now. I'm gonna maybe call around and check and see if he's working on a special project. Meanwhile, our bad actor is over here and he decides, okay, it's time to go down. Well, let's just look at a couple of these documents. Turn on the viewer. What? Can't download the document? Download failed? What's that? Let's try another one. What? I can't. Where's the document? Well, let me just try to download it. Let's see. That was working fine. Let's see if I can download this next batch. That's not working either. So we can see at this point, the bad actor over here, he's stymied. He can't do anything. You know, none of the documents are showing up in the viewer. He can't check them out. He doesn't know what happened. Well, over here, we do know what happened. So we come over and we look at the list of disabled users, and refresh our list. And there's our user. And as we look at it, we can see, you know, here's the activities that this person's been performing the last few days. They've been editing and check out a lot, editing profiles, changing security. So normally that would raise some red flags. And the administrator would say, okay, we need to go talk to this person and find out what's going on. So they might call Brent and say, hey, Brent, what's going on? He said, I'm not doing anything. I haven't even been logged in. Well, that would tell the administrator right then that probably Brent's credentials have been compromised and somebody else was hacking in and trying to get documents. Now, in the second scenario, he'd call Brent up and say, hey, what's going on? Why are you downloading all these documents? And he said, oh, I'm doing a special project for John. You can check with him. Well, I call up John as the administrator, said, hey, Brent says he's downloading a bunch of documents for a special project. And John says, yep, that's correct. So, okay, well, everything he's doing is okay. So as the administrator acting in my role here, I'm going to say, okay, I checked with his boss, his supervisor said everything he's doing is okay. So I'm going to let him get back to work. So we're going to re-enable the user. And then you might call and tell Brent, hey, check your account yet again and see if it's working. And let's see, what have we got here? And there we go. Now when I go to view a document, I can see the document. Yep, there's a document. Okay, let's see. Can I download? Let's see. Check out my documents. Yeah, everything's working again. Boom. Okay, well, we had one bad document. No demos good until it's there's one little glitch. Oh, I know what it is. We were still within the time frame of the rule. So even though I went back to work, I was still within the time frame of the rule. So I bet my account has been re-disabled. There we go. Because I was looking at documents. And in addition to the checkout rule, we have a look rule. So I've been looking at documents, so I'd inadvertently tripped another rule. So this way, you know that Guardian is keeping an eye out for you and is taking care of making sure that you don't lose any documents to someone who shouldn't have them. And just a quick, the last part of the demo, I'll just give you a quick look at the rule creation and maintenance screens. On the look and print rule, it's a custom rule period that checks every 5 minutes. And we do this for demos so that our demos can reset. Normally, most times you go with an hour or a day. Those are the most common when you're looking at the rule periods. And then you look at the activities tab, and this is where you list the activities that are being monitored by this particular rule. And we're looking at looks and also prints. So if someone's printing a bunch of documents or looking at a bunch of documents, this rule will pick up on it. We also have an email copy rule set up, and this one's set up so that it's at 20% above their normal activity. This is a predictive, as this would be 40% above their regular, and a mail copy would be 60% above their normal activity levels. And then over on the applies to, this is where we determine, is it going to go to the whole library, or are we looking at a certain group that we're going to look at? So let's go ahead and look at our corp law users and apply this particular rule to them. And if you want to, maybe you just had a new hire and they came from the competition and you're not quite sure if they might be a corporate spy. So we're going to keep a close eye on Ann, and we're going to put a special rule just for Ann to keep an eye on her. So in that case, we'd actually remove the group. And now this would be a user rule that would just be monitoring one user. So without getting into all the details about all the configuration and everything, that gives you an idea of how Guardian works in a demo in the real world. And at this point, Josh, would we like to open it up for any questions?
Sure. Let me just, if anybody has any questions, feel free to open up the chat window and be happy to answer anything you might want to know. All right, well, that means we either did a great job of explaining everything or nobody has any questions. That's good news. Right. So just in summary, I have a couple of slides here to describe machine learning. I think I've already gone through that, but I'll just run through it real quick. Again, what it does is it reviews data each night. It will then analyze historical data and compare the patterns of what the user is doing at the present time with what they've done in the past. So the day versus night example would apply when you have machine learning. User groups, as I mentioned, I hope I mentioned before, is when you have people in disparate areas of your organization and you want to monitor them together as a group. Instead of what they're individually doing, you want to know the aggregate of what the 3 or more people are doing, as if it's one entity as opposed to 3 individuals. And the activity groups would be if you have multiple activities that you want to combine, again, an aggregate and get a count of the total number of specific activities as a whole, as opposed to individual reports and notifications at the end for each individual one. And we have a question: if a bad actor gets access to the eDOCS server, can Guardian capture that activity? Brent?
No, what Guardian does is it monitors the activity that goes through the eDOCS interface itself, whether you're doing it through a web page or doing it through the Outlook add-in or the desktop add-in. It monitors the library. So you have other tools in place to protect your repository itself. You know, that'd be walled off behind firewalls. It has a distinct share that only has one user that's allowed to access that directory in the first place. And you already have other tools that are in place to protect your backend repositories. Guardian is meant to protect you against the items that Josh has outlined. You're people that have credentials, that have permission to use the system, or have stolen the credentials to use the system. So we're guarding against the people that are using the interface to try to extract the documents out of your repository.
Thank you, Brent.
Did that address your question?
Okay, if there are no further questions, I want to just wrap up and say I appreciate everybody who took the time to listen to us ramble on for an hour. And if you have any questions or would like further information or to download an e-brochure, please visit our website, www.wertheimglobal.com, or send an email to sales@wertheimglobal.com. And with that, I thank you and have a great day. Take care. Bye.
Thank you all.